Welcome back to the Summer Solstice Virtual Canadian Music Expo. This is the Country Music Edition. Very excited. My name is Mark Belaish. I'm president of the Canadian Music Expo. I'm very excited to introduce Shane Neal, who's host on Country 89 Radio, is also a TV and media personality, who's going to introduce our keynote guest. Thanks very much for being on. And Shane Neal, go ahead.
How you doing, everybody? I want to let you know something. I had a choice of Keith Urban or Tim Hicks, and we picked Tim Hicks because he's the man.
Come on.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here to chit chat with you and talk all things music. I love just talking about music. I could talk about music all day long. So we're good.
You have such a great story. So I'm in Niagara here at Country 89, and you're in Niagara, grew up in Niagara. So listen, man, I play drums in a rock band. It's all about AC/DC and rock and roll in Niagara. And here you are, a Canadian country star. Did you start in rock and roll and kind of deviate towards country? Give me the genesis of how you got into country music.
Well, I was in 100 bands around Niagara, and I played everything because that's just kind of what you had to do, whether it was classic rock, new rock, country, or, when you're playing at the Lions Tavern and somebody asks you for Achy Breaky Heart, you say no, I kind of learned, I learned to play everything. And I played in a million different groups too, tribute bands and wedding bands. And anybody that's done gigs knows that when you do those kinds of things, cruise ships, I worked on cruise ships, you got to learn, like when I did the cruise ship gig, I learned something like 300 songs. And that was everything from disco night to rock and roll to 50s and 60s to country night to everything. So, but what was the common denominator for me was every time I wrote a song, and this had been going on for years, every time I wrote a song and sung it for someone, they'd say, "That's a really great country song." And and as a 15-year-old kid in the heart of grunge, I thought, "What do you mean it's a country song? Like I don't even know what you're saying right now." But in retrospect, as an adult now, I look back on what I liked when I was growing up, and it was a lot of country rock acts, like the Eagles, like Leonard Skinner, like the band, like the Allman Brothers, like kind of the Southern rock sort of thing, the guitars, harmonies. These were the things that attracted me to music. Even the Beatles, you could say, especially the early stuff, they were sort of doing an English version of country and Western every now and again. They're gonna put me in the movies. It's Buck Owens. So in retrospect, and especially that early Stone stuff, like the Girl with the Faraway Eye, early 70s Stones, I should say, Girl with the Faraway Eyes and Dead Flowers, and that whole thing. That's the kind of music that I really love. So, the way I describe it to people is that I'm lucky that my music has found a home on country radio because I did not grow up on a ranch. I don't wear a cowboy hat, but there's something about what I do that fits in more with country radio, or did anyway, than rock radio or alternative radio, So really, I think it just comes down to acoustic guitar and singing. So that's the quick story.
You still have the 90s hat going on with the curved. I like that. You see,
the curved brim. Well, that's hey, listen. When I played traveling baseball for the Niagara Falls minor team in 1994. Listen, I've always been a curved brim guy. There's photos of me, as a 6-year-old kid, fishing with my curved brim. So it's just, you got to do what's natural to you, and there was a discussion in the room, like when I first started hanging around in Nashville, and because at that time, like when just as my career started to break, I had sort of compartmentalized my band in the sense that we could perform a full night of rock music, a full night of country music, or a full night of Irish music. And the only difference was how we dressed. So when we did the country routine, we put on cowboy hats and checkered shirts. And we kind of, to really give an exaggerated, like, oh, the boys are back, but they're doing country tonight. And when we did the Irish routine, it was like, the green Newsies hats. And typically we would do that St. Patty's Day, So, there was a discussion in the room when I first started to hang around with my record label, like, well, do you wear a cowboy hat or a baseball cap? Like those kinds of things. It's like, well, that, naturally I wake up and grab my ball cap and away I go. So, that's how you wind up with a guy like me wearing a baseball cap.
So 2011, you get your record deal. So at that time around there, you were a full-blown country guy at that point with the band, and give me that story there.
Yeah. So there came a point where country music changed somewhere along there. And all of a sudden you had guys that made sense to me, like Jason Aldean, Eric Church, even to some extent, like what Big and Rich was doing. You know, all of a sudden you had rock guitar happening in country music and on CMT and on the radio. And, you know, he had like Jason Aldean really resonated with me. You know, his drummer, Rich Redmond, they had a mohawk, and he reminded me of the guys in Betty Ford. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like I was like, I know those guys. You know what I mean? Like I really identified with sort of the rock country thing. You know, they're all wearing chains and they had pyro going on. And I thought, I'm home. This is where I belong. And to really drive that point home, it took me a long time to figure out where I fit in as an artist. And once I saw that happening, I was like, oh, but this is where I belong, you know, that kind of thing. And I really haven't looked back, even as the trends have changed in country music to the more pop end of things. Like I'm still pushing guitars, right? And because that's the currency that I deal in when it comes to live music.
It's funny you say Rich Redmond, because I've had the opportunity in person and on radio to interview him a number of times.
Yeah.
And to me as a drummer, I thought the same thing. Here's a guy like a rock drummer, man. And and I'm like, I can play country. You see, I can play country. It wasn't all about just the old school, right?
Well, and I think that, you know, like I said, as the genre sort of changed, that was when things started to happen for me, you know. I think it was just dumb luck. Like I was gigging 6 nights a week, if not more. I was doing silly things. Like I would do like 14 days in a row and like blow out my voice because I was singing every night 4 or 5 hours. I forget where I was going with this, with the Rich Redmond thing. I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Sometimes that happens.
We have a lot to talk about.
It'll come back to me. Yeah.
So
anyway, it was a good time. That's what I was going to say, is that I just happened to be standing there with a guitar doing what was popular in that moment, you know, and I was ready for it. See, that's the thing. So I took a lot of slack from my musician buddies for doing covers for a lot of years, because music was my living. So you had to do covers in order to keep your lights on and keep food in the cupboard. You know, my artist buddies would be like, nah, dude, you got to do originals to make it, you know? And I believe that too. But the way I looked at it was, if I can play every night, and whether it was, you know, for $80 or $100 or $150, didn't matter. You know, what mattered most was that I was musically in shape when my number came up. So I just figured the longer I could hold on to doing something, eventually someone would hear me, you know, and maybe some things might happen, you know, that sort of thing. So I really wanted to make it my business to be ready for that. And I think that's what playing in bars and playing covers, you know, did for me all those years. Not to mention, you know, when it's your job every day to dissect, you know, the solo in Sweet Home Alabama, that can only help you when it comes to writing songs, you know, when you're learning all that material, all those songs, whether it doesn't even matter what genre, like Beatles songs, pop songs, old rock, old country, new country, doesn't matter. When you're learning all that stuff and learning how, you know, dissecting it, you're really learning how they build it, right? So that comes in handy when you're learning how to write songs. Because for me, I had to learn real fast how to write songs in the Nashville crowd.
So your first album comes out, you get a gold single. But there's challenges along the way, I'm sure. And we all talk in life about leveling up, right? We're going to go to the next level. Tell me some of your early challenges, because you probably got to a point where you're like, man, I'm going to do this. But then something, I'm sure, has happened along the way where you're like, I don't know now. Like, give me some of those challenges that happened early.
Yeah, well, the biggest challenge for me, and please don't take this the wrong way. The biggest challenge for me is my career happened a little later than it would maybe for a lot of people. So I was in my early 30s and I had a baby. So you know, the idea of like what seems to be happening now is the first thing you do is move to Nashville. Then you try and get your carear going. You know what I mean?
Did you move to Nashville? No.
No, I never did. It was never in the cards for me. I only ever dreamed as far as Canada. Like one of my favorite bands in the world is Blue Rodeo. And I talk about them a lot because that is the kind of career that I'm after, where I can have longevity and go out on the road every year and play, put out an album or not, you know, and just play and make a living doing music and do that within the borders of Canada. It was never on my list of goals to try and break America or worldwide or do anything like that. I didn't think that would be possible, and I didn't really want to. Like, I have no desire to be away from my family more than I'm already away. So I would say that the biggest challenge is the balance of like being a dad and a husband, and having this whole thing happen, which was pure insanity, breakneck pace for the first 3-4 years of it, just like, because things were happening so fast and changing so fast that it was hard to catch your breath sometimes. And then, I'd be home and my poor wife is like, you need to take these kids. I need to get out. I come home from the road being exhausted, because you're just, that's, I think what a lot of people don't understand, or maybe they do now, I'm not sure, but at least it took a while for my family and for my close friend group to understand, is that when you go out there and you play for 90 minutes, if you do it right, you leave it all out there. Absolutely. And you're exhausted after the show and the next day. And after a tour, I'm emotionally exhausted from it, because it's like, it's so difficult to maintain that level of serotonin in your brain, like just from a chemical point of view. You go out and you're like, you're all amped up to play. And I could see, I really got a lesson in how it would be easy to fall into the dark side of the music business. Because of course, the first thing you do is go, well, how can I chemically enhance my experience here so I have the energy to go out and play? Now, that's not my style or my speed, or and I'm not really into any of that. But I could see how, especially a young person, would get wrapped up in it and wrapped up in your own hype, right, of it. So I
feel that here in radio. I get tired after 4 hours. I say that it all out.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure.
I got a couple of questions here, so I want to get to these from people. What advice would you give a musician who's just starting out, trying to make it in the music business?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and I always say the same thing. And to me, and let me preface this by saying everybody has their own path, and it's going to happen for you in different ways. For me, the advice that I give people is get out and play. Play as much as you can. Play in your grandmother's backyard at your barbecue. Go and, obviously you can't do this right now, but when there isn't a global pandemic, get yourself a copy of the View magazine if you're in Niagara or wherever, and find out where there are open mic nights and go and play them and get comfortable playing in front of people. And because the online thing is really alluring, I can put a minute video of me on TikTok and become a star, and I don't have to put in all that extra work. Well, guess what happens? When you blow up on TikTok, eventually you're going to have to stand in front of an audience and sing and play. And I have seen it happen with my own two eyes, where somebody, gets discovered, and, all of a sudden it's like, a manager hands them a set of in-ear monitors and says, "You're a star now, Jimmy, go out and do your thing." And they have no skill set to fall back on. Yeah. So that's the advice I give to people. It's like, get comfortable performing in front of people, get comfortable troubleshooting problems in the moment. Your microphone isn't always going to work. What do you do? Your guitar player might fall over because he had an allergic reaction to something he ate in catering. What do you do? Something is going to malfunction during a performance, and you have to be able to kind of handle those things. And the only way to learn how is to do it and live through it. Yep. And that from gigging.
So I'm going to get, there's other questions here, but before I get to the songs they're asking about, I want to ask about Stronger Beer, because that really is an anthem. And tell me the genesis of that. And a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned to you we were giving away your EP. So I was going through YouTube to find tracks. So I played on the radio right from YouTube. You at the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville singing the song. And make sure there's no swearing in it, and there wasn't. But tell me about the genesis of that, because what an anthem it was for Canada.
Yeah, well, and I've told this story a million times, and this is 100% true. It was never meant to be a song. It was only meant as a joke for my day-to-day manager, who was from West Virginia. So, he would often ask about Canada, like, in the typical stuff, like, how do y'all drink milk from bags? Like things like that, right? So we were always schooling him. Anyway, so I meet Jeff Copeland down in Nashville, and we've already written a couple songs, and he picks me up at the office. Typically, I would go into the office, have a meeting with my managers, have a coffee, somebody would come and pick me up, or I would Uber to my right, whatever. So Jeff grabs me and I look at him and go, if you don't mind, I'd like to hit a Shoppers and grab a pack of Smarties before we go to the studio. And he says to me, I don't understand a word you just said. And I said, oh, I'm in America. Okay, well, I would like to go to CVS and get some M&Ms.
M&Ms, that's right, yeah.
Right, and so we just started chit-chatting about the differences between Canada and America. And Copeland is Canadian, but he left Canada when he was 18 and moved to New York City and then now Nashville. So he wasn't even really aware that, for instance, Canada has a professional football league. When I explained to him that the ball, it was at one time, I think they're the same size now, but the ball at one time was slightly bigger than the NFL and the field is longer. These kinds of things. He's like, oh, wouldn't it be great? We should write this silly song for Denny, and we'll write a real song, but we'll send him the joke song and have get the reaction. And then we'll send in the real song. So we wrote 2 songs that day and sent in the demo. And, it was like a scene out of a movie. Like we get this call and the song's playing in the background. They're like, we love it. It's great. It's going on the record. And I was like, no, it's not. No. You don't understand. That was just a joke. Like, I don't want bigger balls in a longer field. Like I can't be the guy that goes and sings that. And, and boom, I remember at CRS, which is the radio convention in Nashville, I sung it for every Canadian radio rep that was there. And they all were like, when can we play this? And I thought, oh God, no. And then it goes platinum. So then, 2 things that I love about that. Number one, that we weren't trying. It just happened very naturally.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is a song that puts a smile on people's faces, like it's a little bit of comic relief, is really pleasing to me. And that being said, and it's lovely to have a song like that, in your set list. But we do make people work for it. It goes in the encore now.
I've got what else do I have here? This is funny. So what a song should do, by the way, my favorite Tim Hicks song.
I appreciate that.
And Karen, how do you say her last name?
Kozlowski. Okay. Yes.
I did a panel for Canadian Music Week, and she was on it. And we were talking about that song at Canadian Music Week. But the question here, I'm going to read it, says, how do you pick the songs that go to number 1? Wouldn't you like to pick all your songs? What a song should do, or No Truck Song? You have 2 number 1s.
Yeah.
Is it your manager, producer, or who picks the songs, I guess, to be released is the question.
We all have a say. We all have a say in what gets released to radio. And I mean, no one has a say in what goes number 1. That's really up to the universe. But when we pick singles, it's always painful for me. And because there's anytime you go to release a song to radio, especially for whatever reason, I lose sleep about it. Because it's like, is this where it ends? Is radio going to play me? Are they going to add me in Vancouver? Are they, like these things that, so there have been times in my career where I've said to my team, listen, here are the songs. I love them all. You guys tell me which ones you think are singles. But then, if I don't agree with something, or if I'm a little bit worried about it, I will have no qualms speaking up about it. And I do, like, there are certain songs, like I thought they were crazy when they wanted to release No Truck Song. I thought, because that was one, when we wrote What a Song Should Do, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and we all knew we had something special that day. And we couldn't wait for the world to know, worthy of words on your tattoo. That's what a song should do. Like, I couldn't wait to get that song out. And we knew if there was ever a Tim Hicks song that had a shot at number 1, that would be it. And then, but on the converse side, it's like the day we wrote No Truck Song, it was another joke. Like we were doing a night right, which always involves, a couple of beers and some pizza.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And it was just me, Bruce Wallace and Jeff Copeland. And, you get these, every now and again, there's things that go through Nashville. Like, well, you can't write songs about trucks anymore, or you can't say painted on jeans, or you can't say raise them up. Like, there's all these rules that kind of, once it's been done a million times, then people get uncomfortable if you incorporate that into your song. So, Bruce asked me, what do you want to write? I said, something real country. And Jeff pipes up and it's like, as long as it's not about trucks, because we'll never get it cut. And I'm just like, challenge accepted. Here it goes. This ain't no truck song. And we wrote that song in about 90 minutes, and we laughed a ton, and then we hit the bar, and nobody looked at each other and said, just wrote a #1, boys. Like it was,
right.
That song was just dumb luck, I think, releasing a song that was a little bit tongue in cheek at a time when the world was pretty dark,
Yeah.
and we needed that comic relief. So I'm happy to provide that from time to time.
I am looking back because I am running a live radio show, as you
Amazing.
know. It's
Amazing.
sort of live. By the way, I do have Tim Hicks, The Good, the Bad, and the Pretty is coming up next.
Hey, all right.
But we'll talk about that. But I want to ask you about
Sure.
What was the next one that's up here? What's your ideal musician to collaborate with? I got to tell you something before you answer that. I interviewed Alan Doyle last weekend, and I love Alan, and I love everything he represents about Eastern Canada and the whole vibe. And the night that Patty Murphy died, one of my favorite. I spun that a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
You've done some stuff with other artists like Lindsay L. So who's been your favorite collaboration? And if you had to pick another one or the next one, who would that be?
Well, my favorite, I mean, I love them all for different reasons, but it was really surreal to work with Alan Doyle. And that came about very naturally. Like we had to do a thing for CCMA called the Legend Show. And what they do is they pair guys like Alan up with, up and comers like myself, and you do a number. And we performed Lovers in a Dangerous Time that night, and it went really well. And we went backstage, we were hanging, and I had the right amount of wobbly pops to get up the courage to tell him how much he and Great Big Sea meant to me growing up and playing. And I told him, I said, Alan, there was a time when I would do no less than 3 Great Big Sea songs a night. He says, really? Which ones? So I'm like, oh God, don't make me tell you. So I told him, what went through, and he said, Patty Murphy, huh? I said, yeah. He said, I've been thinking about doing a different version of that, but kind of heavier, like sort of, a little bit more rock oriented. You'd be the perfect guy. Would you be interested? I said, Alan, I could sing it right now. We could go back up there and do it. And it would be, I know all the words, I know everything. He's like, okay. So then, you got to get the managers involved, and people got to sign off on this and sign off on that. And we met his band with half of my band. And I brought my wife out with me because she's a huge fan of Alan's as well. And we spent the day in the studio with him in Halifax. So really like right in the heart of the East Coast music scene to cut the night Patty Murphy died. So that was a big moment for me. I remember telling him, like, all my high school girlfriends are going to be pretty jealous that I'm hanging with you right now. So that was fun. But if I had to pick someone else, like, I think that I'd go out of genre, I mean, not that they're not great country acts right now to perform with. Like, obviously I talk about it all the time. I would love to do something with Eric Church one day. I would do something with Dallas. Meg Patrick, I think, is doing great things, and she's, she's so talented. But I would look elsewhere. Like, I'd love to do something with, like, someone like the Beaches. I think that would be a riot. Or like the Trues, like
Absolutely.
I love those guys. And especially because a band like that is like, they're so old school in the sense that they went out and did it. Like they went and played and played and played and played until someone noticed them, and haven't looked back. So there's lots of people on the scene I'd love to do that with. Any of the Hamilton guys, like Tom Wilson just tweeted up, we did a whole gig together, a bunch of us, and we were up singing up on Cripple Creek, and I watched it, and that immediately took me back. Like, he's another guy. Like, when you stand on a stage next to Tom Wilson, he is a force to be reckoned with. Like, and you can just feel the music, permeating from him. So he'd be another one I would love to do something with.
There's other questions, but I do want to ask before I get to some of them. You mentioned a couple times your team. So again, on the industry side of things, how does one create a team? Does the label create the team? Do you create it with your label? Kind of, how does all that happen?
I think that it's different for everybody. For me, my management team is the same as my record label. So, which a lot of people are like, ooh, it's dangerous. That's called a 360 deal. It's pretty much the only deal you can get in the 21st century. So it is what it is. But, I took a course. This is going to sound weird, but in 1993 at the Boys and Girls Club in Niagara Falls, this guy, Rick McLean, who, do you know Rick actually from around town? Okay,
yeah.
Rick McLean ran a course out of the Boys and Girls Club that was like music industry arts kind of thing, like way before his time. So somehow my mom knew him and like got me into this thing as a 13-year-old kid. And we got visits from like agents and managers. And one thing that really stuck with me that I think rings true when the agent came, and because of course everyone wants to know, well, how do I know when it's time to get a manager or an agent? And what they said was, you'll know it's time because you won't have time or the know-how to do all the things that you need to do. So, I think that your team will fall into place when it's time. Like, you don't need a publicist until there's something that you need a publicist for. Yes. And you can, for instance, you could pay a publicist to do whatever and sink a lot of money into that. But, anybody worth their salt will tell you, save your dough. And when it's time, you'll know. You'll know you need an agent because, you're so busy doing other things that you can't book shows for yourself. And that was a part to me. People often want to know, because I booked myself for years. And what I didn't know was that I was filling all those shoes. I was my own agent. I was my own road manager. I was my own musical director. We just called it being in a band back then.
Right. That's it.
So that's what you did. And people ask me like, oh, was it hard to hand over that responsibility? I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, it would freak me out every quarter to open my, $3 Staples vinyl monthly calendar and see blank squares. And I would be a wreck until I filled all those in. You know what I mean? So I think that you'll know when it's like fishing. Like, well, how do I know when I get a bite? You'll know. It's the same thing with your team in the music business. You'll know you need a manager because there'll be so much stuff that you have to do that you can't do it yourself. And so
I think I need a manager. That's what you've taught me right now.
Right. There you go.
Okay. Here, this is interesting because you and I were talking before we went live that you were going to be playing the O2. And you were over in Europe and that. But the question is, where I saw it, now I lost it. If you could play anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, there's some pretty epic venues out there. I would love to play the Sydney Opera House. I think that'd be pretty cool. But honestly, like, I just love playing. Like, I never thought that I would have the opportunity to do what I do outside of Canada. So, for instance, before COVID hit, I was right at the beginning of my first world tour, and we had done shows in Berlin and Amsterdam. And we were about to play in London. So just getting to do that in a place like Amsterdam or Berlin was pretty cool. And, they were kind of like small venues. One, I think we had 700 kids at, which was great. For like, I'd been to Amsterdam as a tourist, but never been there to do my thing. And so to have 700 kids, singing along was pretty cool. So, I would play anywhere, really. It's hard for me to narrow it down. But I will say this, like, there are some key venues in Canada that are amazing. Like the Commodore Ballroom is awesome. I'd love to play Massey Hall. Still haven't gotten to play Massey Hall yet. I got to play Cops a few times, which was cool. And Bud Stage is an amazing venue to play. So
I can't believe we're getting kicked off because we have to go. I've listed things to talk about, but you know what, man? This here hangs up here. Can you see that? I know it's glaring.
Lovely.
Yeah.
That's
there
awesome.
You go. So if you want a copy, I can sell you one. I have an extra one here.
I'm good. My wife says no more plaques. I'm not allowed to hang anything more on the wall.
Mark's here though, because we got to go apparently. So
thanks for the chat, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks, Tim and Shane. Great info. I know there were a number of questions that we couldn't get to as well, but really great hearing your story. Massey Hall is starting up again, right? We got some coming up, City and Color later this year. So one of these days, right? So I wanted to thank both of you, obviously, for being on here. I also wanted to thank today's Best Country Radio, Country 89, for sponsoring today's event. You can visit country89.com. You can listen to them on the radio. And coming up as well, an interview with Evan Farrell, country singer-songwriter, hosted by Dave Woods, who's host of the podcast In the Country. Also, in a couple minutes, Brandon Laforte, co-founder of 416 SBA, is going to be talking about what the heck is an NFT and why do I need one? And if you don't know what an NFT is, you want to be at his event. session starting shortly. And then at 12:30 Eastern time, which is in about half an hour, I'm going to be in conversation with David Boyd-Janes. He's a recording artist, singer, songwriter, Boots and Hearts Emerging Artist winner from 2019 as well. So you don't want to miss that. And don't forget to check out our expo area. There's a lot of great sponsors and exhibitors in that area. And hang out for another couple hours or so. We're on here until 2 o'clock Eastern time. And again, thanks, Shane. Yeah, you want to mention something, Shane?
Well, there's a question here I can answer. TimHicksMusic.com. Someone was asking about
website.
Out more, about getting more information about Tim.
Listen,
out to him, so.
Have everyone tweet or Facebook or whatever. Send if they've got questions and they want me to answer them, just hit me up on social media.
Excellent. Well, thanks guys, and a lot of great feedback just coming in the chat. So thanks to both of you, and
awesome.
Look forward to connecting with you more.
Awesome. Right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, guys. See you guys.
Thanks. Cheers.